Hello, I'm Sarah Lewis Belcher, attorney, author, and founder of The Change Agents. The Change Agents spreads positive messages about what we like in the world and don't want impacted by climate change, and gives tips on what we can do to slow the warming. Today, we are starting the Change Agents interviews, which highlight people and companies who are walking the walk and making a difference in the climate fight. And I am very pleased to welcome Jeff Mirel as our first guest for the Change Agents interviews. Jeff, thank you so much for kicking off this series.
Oh my God, we're honored. Thank you for thinking of us.
Well, Jeff is the Executive Vice President of the Rosenblum Companies, which develops, owns, and operates premier properties in and around Albany, New York. The Rosenblum Companies have been providing services to the Capital Region since 1979. Their properties include offices, residential, self-storage, and the most recent co-working space. Jeff provides strategic direction and oversight for all company operations. He and Seth Rosenblum, CEO, spearhead the company's new development projects, which are many and varied. Recent projects include residential apartments, self-storage, and co-working space, all in addition to the office properties for which they were originally known. One of the Rosenblum Company's core values is sustainability, and we'll be focusing on that today. The Rosenblum Companies has taken an active role on the sustainability front by investing in green practices and construction. Jeff, please give us the background on why sustainability is a core value of the Rosenblum Companies.
Sure, I'm happy to. So our company has a vertically integrated property management department, and for over 40 years, the company's modus operandi has really been property manager first, real estate developer second. So with this focus on long-term operation, investment decisions aren't really driven by short-term profit, but rather achieving long-term value through efficiency, quality, and resiliency, particularly important these days. Accordingly, environmental stewardship is definitely central to our entire real estate practice. And while greener systems and approaches generally carry a higher first cost, at least right now, they do enable us to provide healthier, more efficient spaces that not only benefit the environment, but provide healthier, more economical places to work. And that really translates into a win for our company, our clients, and the community. And it's a community where we live and frankly, where our children live, because we really develop exclusively in the capital region right now. If you consider that in the United States, residential and commercial buildings account for 40% of energy consumption, and globally nearly the same amount for annual energy-related carbon dioxide emissions, we have a responsibility to be part of the solution and not the problem. So we've actually made it a 10-year goal of our company to make all our new development projects net zero carbon.
Excellent, I love that. So more specifically, how do the Rosenblum Companies put the core value of sustainability into practice? So I imagine it differs across the various property types, such as whether you're doing new construction or renovation and the use to which the property will be put.
That is true, but actually we apply a holistic three-dimensional approach to sustainability to all of our asset types that effectively is based on place, practice, and performance. So for place, it really starts with the project type and the site selection. So our new development projects, we tend to favor adaptive reuse and sympathetic new construction infill, like 17 Chapel in Albany and the News Apartments and Vicina, both in Troy, New York, where we can upcycle a building or an underutilized but already developed property versus doing greenfield development. And then walkability and access to mass transit, shared mobility infrastructure is really important as related considerations. For performance, that really relates to building design and systems. So we're proud of a legacy of being a market leader in deploying green building systems, as well as renewables, landscaping, and stormwater management practices. We also invest in developing in-house expertise. So for example, we have an internal construction management department that oversees both the company's new projects and improvements of existing building stock, to support the company's evolving high performance construction. One of our lead project managers, who's also a New York State licensed architect, is completing her passive house design certification. And our director of construction, who's the department lead, just completed certified passive house builder training. And then the last piece is practice, and that's really sustainable culture. So, you know, we are a company that serves tenants, and so we seek to empower our tenants and our residents to be more sustainable themselves by providing environmentally friendly amenities and services, such as indoor bicycle storage and repair, EV charging stations that are generally free to use, electronics recycling, and also integrated alternative transit micro-mobility options like bike share and car share. And we do that through partnerships with the Capital District Transit Authority, CDTA, and other local providers like Capital Car Share. And then we also host an annual e-cycling day that is free for our office tenants to dispose of unwanted electronic waste. And I only mention that because it's actually a big number. We've collected nearly 18 tons of electronic waste since we started doing that. So,
oh my,
pretty cool. Yeah, when I saw that number, I was like, wow, we have really done that. That is neat. But you know, I think it's important to note that this approach applies to both new development work as well as the redevelopment and continuous improvement of legacy-owned assets, like Great Oaks Office Park in Albany, which we developed back in the 1990s. So, you know, in the past 5 years alone at Great Oaks, we've undertaken exterior and interior LED lighting retrofits. We've installed new UV reflective gray roofs. We added a rooftop solar system that was the second largest solar project in Albany County that year, according to NYSERDA. And the LED parking lot, that light conversion alone reduced the associated annual energy consumption by 79%. Some other eco-friendly initiatives at Great Oaks, sort of outside of the energy sphere, include low impact integrated pest management, utilization of green certified cleaning products, and porous pavement parking lots to mitigate stormwater runoff. We were actually an early adopter of porous pavement, and now something of a local authority on its long-term operation and maintenance, which is great because it speaks to that desire to help others be more sustainable. In fact, even some of our artwork is green. Great Oaks was the first commercial property to feature large-scale installations made from decorative mycoboard and mycofoam, I think I'm saying that right, wall tiles, manufactured by a local biomaterials company, Ecovative Design, in lieu of traditional artwork.
Wow, that is so impressive, especially the way that you're not just providing a space for somebody to live and work, you're providing options for them to change their lifestyle to be more environmentally and climate friendly, which it's huge, because that will have much more wide-reaching impacts than just giving them a place to live or work. So there clearly are costs, which I'm sure are not insubstantial, associated with being sustainable. Even though you might have savings along the line to get there, I'm sure it's relatively expensive, I assume. So how do you quantify the benefits of sustainability when you're doing your cost benefit analyses before you undertake projects?
Sure. I mean, it's probably a bit of an oversimplification, but we really just start with capitalizing the projected operating cost savings from lower energy consumption and overhead over a reasonable period of time to gauge the return on investment. You know, our focus, again, is on long-term value over short-term earnings. So particularly in the last 5 years, we've taken an iterative approach on the company's path to net zero, deploying high efficiency assemblies and systems like ground source heat pumps and solar. So that's providing us with real working data that we can apply to our analyses for subsequent projects and also approve on from a standpoint of benchmarking. But you know, there are also a lot of intangibles that need to be considered, particularly changes in regulation and building code, you know, aimed at reducing carbon emissions, as well as just marketability.
Speaking of that, are rents for your spaces comparable to rents for spaces that aren't as environmentally friendly? I'm sure that's something that people always wonder. I know I do.
Yes. You know, so I think the better question is how do our total occupancy costs compare? Meaning not just rent, but also amenities and utilities.
True.
And to that extent, yes, our total cost of occupancy is comparable to other properties that don't offer the same sustainability or health upsides.
Excellent. So you don't have that hurdle to go over when you're marketing your spaces. You've got many other benefits to make up for what might appear to be a higher cost.
Yeah, and the deeper you the deeper you go into the high performance building realm, obviously the higher the first cost and the more challenging that becomes. And that's part of the analysis.
Right, right. And one thing you mentioned, which really sticks out in my mind, is the longer term analysis as opposed to shorter term, which I assume makes a huge difference. And it's something we all need to really look towards, I think, more than a lot of folks do now. So do you feel that your customers are considering and weighing the climate-friendly aspects of your spaces before they decide to live and work there? And do you find that the extent of consideration varies among different types of property?
I think there is a growing cohort of residential renters and companies like ours that have, sustainability as a core value, who are more attuned to climate-friendly spaces, particularly in the residential and office spheres. But overall, they're not yet driving most lease decisions, at least in our market. I do feel that we're approaching an inflection point, particularly with millennials and Gen Z, as we kind of all are experiencing the more pronounced impacts of global warming.
Definitely. Well, that's encouraging, I guess, for what we're going through, that there have been some impacts. So it sounds like, and I'm hopeful myself that this will be the case, that the demands you just mentioned will eventually lead to non-ecologically conscious spaces being phased out by the market, but we're just not really there quite yet.
I think so. Yeah, I do. I think it's more of an awareness than demand at this point. So it's really about offering it's simply offering a better product overall for a comparable price, and then maybe ultimately some premium. I think to that end, we're currently in the early stages of developing our first net zero multifamily project, which we plan to achieve through a passive house approach. And, the airtight envelope coupled with continuous filtered ventilation and controlled humidity that are the characteristics of passive house not only provide better energy performance, but sound attenuation, temperature stability during power events, which are more likely as global warming causes increasingly intensive storms, and better disease resistance, which, given the current pandemic is particularly noteworthy. I think because many prospective tenants are not necessarily motivated by a greener option alone, building design needs to holistically address ecological, economic, and wellness attributes. And in turn, you have an enhanced value proposition that should drive tenant attraction and retention. And that has the related benefit of lowering related OpEx like turnovers, marketing, advertising. And that goes back to that sort of, return on investment calculation.
Exactly, right. So many factors. I think things you mentioned are not necessarily things that are top of mind for a lot of folks, but it's extremely helpful to hear them, how many go into what we're trying to do from a global perspective, as far as saving ourselves in a lot of respects. So again, from an environmental perspective, where do you see, and I think you've addressed a lot of this already, but where do you see development and operation of office, residential, and other spaces heading in the mid to longer term, say 5 or 10 years, as well as further out, to the extent that folks are looking at that?
Yeah, I mean, the future is interesting. I think that, speaking to the future in general, I, for one, believe that if we don't follow the science and take aggressive measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and curb global warming, our kids and their kids will suffer dire consequences, which will disproportionately affect vulnerable populations. But more than that, we lose a tremendous economic opportunity to lead the world in innovative, sustainable technology development and production. So it's one of the things one of the reasons I'm proud to live and develop real estate in New York, is that we have a governor and a government that are setting very high bars for the deployment of renewable energy, electrification, and building performance, including the New York Stretch Energy Code, which includes passive house as a compliance path. And some municipalities are already adopting New York Stretch, or at least more rigorous performance standards into their local codes. But wisely, New York's approach is not simply mandates trying to legislate change. For example, rather than simply subsidizing the construction of high performance buildings, NYSERDA is providing funding to assist developers with creative business cases for carbon neutral buildings that can be shared and replicated to accelerate adoption. So, one thing I do think we will see evolve will be the discussion around embodied carbon in building materials. So the carbon use intensity of manufacturing and transportation of those goods, as well as in the construction process itself. And that, again, creates tremendous opportunity for innovation in design, materials, and processes. So it's still early days in some respects, but it's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also so encouraging to hear that there's a path forward rather than being stuck in the way things are done now, which have gotten us to where we are. There's a different way to do things that can make a difference.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to hear that they're being implemented, and the Rosenblum Companies is at the front of that.
Well, we're trying, at least in our little pond, but
and hence why you're so busy, because there's a lot to it.
No, there is, but you hit on something interesting, which is in terms of sort of like those existing spaces that are not necessarily they're the legacy buildings or the outmoded properties. I think that ideally the leveraging multifaceted benefits of high performance building design over today's conventional buildings is the right path. But I think it comes not through raising or abandoning outmoded spaces, but rather retrofitting them. Since upcycling a building will always be the most environmentally sound, most carbon neutral approach, I think.
Yeah, I wondered about that, because there is a lot you need to do, but then again, to start from scratch is a huge undertaking as well. So excellent. Well, Jeff, I have so much enjoyed this conversation, and I think that folks who are watching and are listening to it will gain a lot from it. So I thank you so much for sharing and taking the time out of your super busy schedule with all you've got going on with myriad of projects to talk with us about the Rosenblum Company's commitment to sustainability and how you're implementing it across your projects. I want to thank our audience as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you for providing a platform. It's these kind of dialogues and that are, really affirming as we are challenging ourselves to be more socially and environmentally responsible, as a company, as individuals. So
right.
It's a lot of fun to talk about, and we'll look forward to staying in touch and keeping you apprised of our progress.
Sounds good. And as folks want to hear more, or you have more to share, just let me know. We'll do more interviews. But as I say, the Change Agents focuses on positive messages, and what you're doing is a totally positive message about we can do this, and here's exactly how. So I really appreciate your sharing and hopefully guiding the way, giving folks ideas about what they can do themselves. Thank you to our audience. If you've got any comments, questions, or ideas for other interviews, I'm going to share my screen so you have both of our contact information. So please feel free to reach out to either one of us. And thanks again, Jeff, for everything and all of your insight. Thanks to our audience. Be well and be a change agent.